How Japanese minimalism helped us heal from toxic people. Ever felt like your life is just too crowded? Not with stuff, but with people who drain every bit of energy from you? What if we told you that the answer to dealing with toxic relationships isn't found in self-help books, but in the simple, quiet wisdom of Japanese minimalism? You know, we've all been there, sitting in our rooms, surrounded by things we don't need, and thinking about people who don't deserve our time. And here's the thing that hit us like a ton of bricks one random Tuesday afternoon. Our physical clutter and our emotional clutter were basically the same problem. When we discovered Japanese minimalism, we thought it was just about throwing out old clothes and keeping our desks clean. But honestly, it turned into something so much deeper. It became our way out of toxic relationships that were eating away at our peace, one day at a time. Japanese minimalism isn't just Marie Kondo asking if your socks spark joy. It's actually an entire way of looking at life that's been part of Japanese culture for centuries. The concept comes from Zen Buddhism and this idea that less truly is more. Not in that trendy Instagram way, but in a genuine, life-changing way. And when we started applying these principles to our relationships, everything shifted. We're talking about real change here, the kind that sticks. Understanding Japanese minimalism beyond objects. So let's talk about what Japanese minimalism actually means when we take it beyond just organizing our closets. There's this beautiful Japanese word called ma, which basically means the space between things. It's about emptiness, but not in a sad way. Think of it as breathing room. In traditional Japanese art, the empty space is just as important as the painted parts. Wild, right? We spend our whole lives trying to fill every gap, every silence, every moment. But Japanese minimalism teaches us that the empty spaces matter just as much. Then there's Danshari, which is probably the most powerful concept we've come across. It breaks down into 3 parts: refusing things you don't need, disposing of things that don't serve you, and separating yourself from attachment. When we first read about this, we were nodding along thinking about that old sweater in our closet. But then it clicked. What about that friend who only calls when they need something? What about that family member who makes every gathering about drama? Suddenly, Danshari wasn't about stuff anymore. It was about people. The Japanese also have this practice called Seijaku, which means tranquility or stillness. In a world that tells us to hustle, network, and say yes to everything, Seijaku is like a gentle whisper saying, it's okay to be still. It's okay to have quiet. It's okay not to fill every hour with social obligations. And for us, this was huge because we realized that toxic people hate stillness. They thrive on chaos, on constant contact, on keeping us off balance. And here's where things got really interesting for us. We started decluttering our apartment, right? Getting rid of things that didn't serve us anymore. Old books we'd never read again, kitchen gadgets we used once, clothes that didn't fit. And with each item that left our space, we felt lighter. But we also started noticing something strange. As our physical space got clearer, we became more aware of who was cluttering our emotional space. There's actually research backing this up. A study from Princeton University found that physical clutter competes for our attention, making it harder to focus and increasing stress. But we think it goes deeper than that. When we're surrounded by mess, we can hide. We can avoid looking at the bigger picture. Once our space was clear, there was nowhere to hide from the truth about certain relationships in our lives. We had this moment standing in our newly organized living room, and it was so quiet and peaceful. And we thought, why doesn't our social life feel this way? Why do we dread checking our messages? Why do we feel exhausted after hanging out with certain people? The answer was right there. Just like we'd been holding on to broken things and clothes that didn't fit, we were holding on to relationships that had expired a long time ago. So we decided to try it. We took the 3 principles of Danshari and started applying them to our relationships. First up was refusing. This meant saying no to new relationships that showed red flags right from the start. You know those people who come on super strong, want to be best friends immediately, overshare, and make you their therapist within a week? Yeah. We started politely keeping our distance. It felt weird at first because we'd been taught that being friendly means being available to everyone. But Japanese minimalism taught us that being selective isn't being mean, it's being wise. The second part of disposing of what doesn't serve us was harder, way harder. We're talking about people we'd known for years, people who had our phone numbers and followed us on social media. But here's what we learned. Toxic people don't become toxic overnight. It's a slow drain. They cancel plans last minute, but expect us to drop everything for them. They share our secrets, but get upset if we don't tell them everything. They criticize our wins and disappear during our losses. When we really looked at these patterns, the decision became clearer. We didn't do anything dramatic, no big confrontations or burning bridges. We just quietly started creating distance, responded slower to texts, became busy when they wanted to hang out, stopped sharing personal things. The Japanese call this enryo, which is about restraint and holding back. In minimalism, it's about being intentional with our energy. And honestly, most toxic people didn't even notice at first, because they were never really paying attention to us anyway. They just wanted an audience. The third part, separating from attachment, was the deepest work. We had to let go of who we thought these people were, let go of the history, let go of the hope that they'd change. There's this concept in Japanese Buddhism called mujo, which means impermanence. Everything changes, people change, relationships change. And sometimes holding on to what was prevents us from seeing what is. This gave us permission to grieve these relationships while also releasing them.
Creating ma in our social lives. Remember that concept of ma, the meaningful, empty space? We started building that into our social calendar. Instead of filling every weekend with plans, we left gaps. Instead of being part of every group chat, we muted some. Instead of attending every event, we started choosing carefully. And you know what happened? In that space, we found ourselves again. The empty space gave us time to think about what we actually wanted from friendships. It gave us energy to invest in relationships that felt good. It helped us notice patterns we'd been too busy to see before. We realized that we'd been so afraid of being alone that we'd surrounded ourselves with people who made us feel lonely anyway. That's the cruel irony of toxic relationships. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely isolated. In Japanese tea ceremonies, there's so much emphasis on the pauses between actions, the silence between words, the space between people. It's in those spaces that real connection happens. When we brought this into our friendships, we noticed that good friends were comfortable with silence. They didn't need constant contact to maintain the relationship. They respected our need for space. The toxic ones? They hated it. They'd bombard us with messages asking if something was wrong. They'd guilt trip us for not being constantly available. And that told us everything we needed to know. The healing that came from less. Here's the thing nobody tells you about removing toxic people from your life. It's going to feel empty at first. There were weekends where we didn't have plans. There were days where our phone was quiet. And initially, it felt wrong. We'd been so used to the chaos that the peace felt uncomfortable. But we stuck with it because Japanese minimalism taught us to trust the process. Slowly, that emptiness started feeling different. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was spacious, free. We had energy for hobbies we'd abandoned. We started reading again, going for long walks, trying new things without worrying about someone judging us or making it about themselves. We began sleeping better because we weren't replaying stressful conversations in our heads every night. Our anxiety levels dropped. We felt like ourselves than we had in years. And then something beautiful happened. Better people started showing up, not because we went looking for them, but because we had space for them now. When you're not wasting energy on relationships that drain you, you become magnetic to relationships that fill you. We met people who respected boundaries, who celebrated our wins, who showed up consistently, who made us feel energized, not exhausted. Quality over quantity isn't just true for objects, it's especially true for people. Japanese minimalism gave us more than a clean apartment. It gave us a framework for understanding that we deserve relationships that feel as peaceful as a decluttered room. That it's okay to let people go who don't fit our lives anymore. That empty space isn't something to fear, but something to honor. The Japanese have known this for centuries. Simplicity isn't about having less for the sake of less. It's about making room for more of what matters. So if you're dealing with toxic people right now, think about this. What would happen if you treated your relationships like you treat your closet? What if you looked at each person and asked, does this relationship serve me? Does it bring peace? Does it add value? And if the answer is no, what if you gave yourself permission to let it go? Not with anger, not with drama, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth. Because that's what Japanese minimalism really taught us. We're not meant to carry everything and everyone. We're meant to live lightly, surrounded only by what truly matters. And that, friends, is where healing begins.